It was supposed to be his moment of vindication. The day Prince Harry finally stood tall against the British newspapers and exposed their darkest secrets to the world. He walked into the High Court in London expecting to be the hero of his own narrative. Armed with righteous anger and the belief that the world was on his side. But within hours, that narrative didn't just crack. It shattered into a million pieces. Instead of a triumphant takedown of the press, the world witnessed a royal unraveling in real time. Harry didn't just lose his composure. He lost control of the entire chamber, nearly breaking down in tears. While the magistrate, the one man he needed to impress, publicly scolded him. Not once, not twice, but 3 separate times. What happened inside those walls wasn't just a difficult day in the tribunal. It was a systematic dismantling of a prince's credibility. While Harry wept about the misery of his existence, his wife was 5,000 miles away, seemingly unbothered, posting lifestyle updates that painted a very different picture. From the humiliation of being told to stop arguing with the magistrate, to the shocking revelations about his legal team backing away. This is the true narrative of how a multi-million-dollar lawsuit turned into a public relations catastrophe. And the details that came out under oath reveal that this situation goes far deeper and far darker than anyone realized. The atmosphere in the tribunal shifted the moment Harry took the stand. And it wasn't in his favor. This wasn't a television interview with a friendly host nodding along to his grievances. This was a cross-examination by some of the sharpest legal minds in the United Kingdom, presided over by Justice Matthew Nicholson, a man who deals in facts, not feelings. Almost immediately, Harry tried to play by his own rules. Instead of answering the questions put to him by the defense barrister Anthony White, Harry began to debate. He pushed back, he deflected, and he tried to argue the law with the barristers. It was a strategy that might work in a public relations statement. But in a tribunal of law, it is an absolute disaster. The tension hit a breaking point rapidly. The magistrate, initially trying to be patient, had to intervene. He told Harry quite clearly that he was there to answer questions, not to argue the matters. That was his barrister's duty. But Harry didn't stop. It happened a second time, with the magistrate's tone becoming sharper, the frustration in the chamber palpable. By the third time Harry tried to argue about what qualifies as a journalistic source, Justice Nicholson shut it down completely. It was a humiliating spectacle. A member of the royal household being treated like an unruly schoolboy, because he refused to accept the authority of the tribunal. But that wasn't the whole narrative. The reason for Harry's combativeness wasn't just arrogance. It was panic. The defense had pulled a strategic masterstroke the day before, cutting their opening arguments short and forcing Harry onto the stand a full day earlier than he had prepared for. He looked rattled, uneasy, and completely out of his depths. He wasn't settled, and the defense team knew it. They capitalized on his emotional state. And Harry walked right into the traps, debating the magistrate instead of delivering the documentation. And as terrible as that looked, the things he actually stated under oath were about to make things much worse. As the questioning continued, Harry's testimony took a bizarre and confusing turn that left legal analysts baffled. He began to get distressed, his voice cracking as he told the tribunal that the newspapers had made his wife's existence an absolute misery. He spoke about the pain, the intrusion, and the suffering Meghan had endured. On the surface, it sounds like a protective husband defending his spouse. But there was a massive glaring problem with this emotional display. Meghan Markle has absolutely nothing to do with this lawsuit. The matter Harry is fighting focuses on alleged phone hacking and illegal information gathering that took place between 2001 and 2013. That is the hard timeline. Harry didn't even meet Meghan until the summer of 2016. She wasn't there for the alleged crimes. She wasn't in his existence. She wasn't in his phone. And she wasn't the subject of the articles in question. Yet Harry tried to make her the centerpiece of his testimony. It raised a massive red flag about his motivations. Why bring her up in a matter that predates her existence in his world by years? Critics and legal experts began to speculate immediately. Was this a calculated attempt to use Meghan as an emotional shield? Because the actual documentation regarding the 2001 to 2013 era was weak. By dragging her name into proceedings about his past, Harry wasn't strengthening his legal argument. He was exposing the fact that he might be fighting a proxy warfare for present-day grievances, rather than past injustices. It made the entire lawsuit look less like a quest for truth, and more like a venting session for current frustrations. And while he was weeping about her misery in London, the reality of what she was doing at that exact moment told a completely contradictory narrative. While Harry stood alone in the dock, isolated and facing aggressive questioning, the misery he described seemed to be missing from one key location: Montecito, California. Reports surfaced that while her husband was enduring what was arguably the most stressful week of his existence, Meghan was active on social media, showcasing a lifestyle of luxury, calm, and commercial success. She was posting images of their sprawling mansion, the pool, and the sunny California lifestyle. A stark, jarring contrast to the gray, tense atmosphere of the London High Court. The optics were disastrous. This is a couple that has built their entire post-royal brand on the concept of being a united front. Salt and pepper, always moving together. Yet when the heat was turned up to its highest setting, Harry was alone. There was no support in the gallery. No hand to hold during the breaks. Just Harry flailing against a legal system he didn't understand, while his wife was 5,000 miles away managing her social media engagement. The comment sections on these posts exploded with people asking the obvious question. If she is the source of his misery and the reason for this fight, why is she seemingly ignoring the battle? It fed into a growing narrative that Harry is fighting these battles to prove his worth to her, while she remains detached from the fallout. The juxtaposition of Harry weeping in tribunal about how destroyed they are, while Meghan posts curated content about their beautiful existence, created a disconnect that the public couldn't ignore. It made Harry look less like a partner, and more like a soldier sent to the front lines while the general stays safe at headquarters. But the emotional confusion didn't stop with Meghan. It took an even darker turn when the subject of the proceedings forced Harry to drag up his past loves. Perhaps the most uncomfortable aspect of the proceedings was the resurrection of Harry's relationship with Chelsea Davy. Because the timeline is strictly 2001 to 2013, the woman at the center of the privacy invasion claims isn't Meghan. It's Chelsea. She was the one chased by photographers. She was the one whose voicemails were allegedly intercepted. And she was the one who ultimately walked away from Harry because she couldn't handle the royal circus. Chelsea has since moved on. She's married, has children, runs a successful business, and has maintained a dignified silence for over a decade. Yet, in his pursuit of justice, Harry admitted to the tribunal that he had called Chelsea the night before his testimony. He dragged her back into the emotional turmoil she had worked so hard to escape. He spoke about her in tribunal with a level of emotion and regret that raised eyebrows. A heavy, lingering sadness about what could have been. He painted a picture of a relationship destroyed by the press, which may be true. But by focusing so heavily on her, he inadvertently highlighted the contrast between the woman who wanted privacy and got it by leaving, and the woman he is with now who seeks the spotlight. People watching the proceedings found this deeply unfair to Chelsea. She didn't ask to be a character in Harry's legal drama in 2026. She didn't sign up for her name to be splashed across the headlines again. It seemed hypocritical for Harry to scream about the sanctity of privacy, while invading the peace of his former girlfriend to bolster his own matter. It showed a lack of awareness about how his crusade for truth was causing collateral damage to the people he claimed to care about. And speaking of hypocrisy, the defense team was about to drop a bomb that would turn Harry's own words against him in the most damaging way possible. The most lethal weapon the Daily Mail's barristers had wasn't a secret witness or a hidden document. It was Harry's own book, Spare. Harry stood in the witness box and stated with a straight face, I have never believed that my existence is open season to be commercialized by these people. He argued that his personal existence was sacred, and that no one had the right to sell narratives about him. The silence that followed that statement was deafening, because the entire world knows that Harry made millions of dollars doing exactly that. The defense team didn't have to work hard to dismantle this argument. They simply pointed to the record. Harry released a 400-page memoir detailing the most intimate personal moments of his existence and the existences of his household. He published text messages between Meghan and Catherine about bridesmaid dresses. He wrote about losing his virginity. He described personal household fights and medical details. He signed a massive deal with Netflix to air a documentary that took cameras inside his home. He sat down with Oprah for a global interview. He has commercialized every square inch of his existence. For him to stand in a tribunal of law and claim that he opposes the commercialization of his personal existence looked like sheer delusion. It wasn't just a contradiction. It was a fundamental collapse of his entire moral argument. The public reaction was swift and brutal. You cannot sell your privacy to the highest bidder, and then sue the press for writing about you. It cemented the idea that Harry doesn't actually want privacy. He wants censorship. He wants to be the only one allowed to monetize his existence. And he wants the power to silence anyone else who tries to tell a different version of the narrative. But the problems weren't just about his image. They were about the documentation itself. In a tribunal of law, what you feel is irrelevant. What you can prove is everything. And this is where Harry's matter began to crumble structurally. Under cross-examination, it became painfully clear that Harry didn't have the smoking gun everyone expected. When asked for proof that a specific article was the result of phone hacking, Harry repeatedly used phrases like "I believe" or "it seems suspicious." He relied on the assumption that because the information was personal, it must have been stolen. But belief is not documentation, and the defense was ready to prove it. The barristers for the newspaper group methodically went through the articles Harry was complaining about. They showed that in many instances, the information hadn't been hacked. It had been leaked by people in Harry's own circle, or released in official palace statements that Harry had simply forgotten about. They produced emails and records suggesting that the narratives came from legitimate journalistic sources, or even from his friends who were chatting to reporters. This was devastating. It suggested that the paranoid narrative Harry has lived with for years, that he is being bugged and tracked every second, might be exaggerated, or at least not the cause of every narrative. This lack of concrete proof is likely why rumors began swirling that his legal team was backing away. Barristers have a duty to the tribunal. They cannot knowingly present a matter that is built on falsehoods or pure speculation. If Harry is insisting on a narrative that the documentation doesn't support, his barristers are put in an impossible position. Reports that key members of his legal team were considering resigning or were backing away fast suggest that they saw the writing on the wall. They realized that Harry's desire to fight was outpacing his actual ammunition. And if they lose, the cost will be more than just pride. Beyond the humiliation and the emotional toll, there is a cold hard number hanging over this proceedings. $38 million. That is the estimated total of legal costs and potential damages if Harry loses this battle. And the others he is fighting. This isn't just about paying his own barristers who charge exorbitant hourly rates. Under British law, the loser often has to pay the victor's legal fees. Associated Newspapers has hired the best, most expensive defense currency can buy. If Harry loses, he's footing the bill for the very people he despises. Financial experts and royal commentators have pointed out that Harry's liquidity is a mystery. Sure, the Netflix and book deals were huge, but the lifestyle in Montecito is incredibly expensive. Security, travel, the mortgage, the staff. It burns through cash at an alarming rate. And with the Spotify deal collapsed, and the Netflix future uncertain, with reports of shows being cancelled or underperforming, a $30 million legal hit could be catastrophic. It could wipe out a significant chunk of the freedom fund he and Meghan earned by leaving the royal household. This high-stakes gambling adds a layer of desperation to his tribunal performance. He needs this triumph. He needs the vindication to prove that his crusade is valid. But he also likely needs the settlement currency to keep the machine running. This pressure might explain why he was so distressed, so combative, and so on edge. He knows that he has pushed all his chips into the middle of the table. And the cards he is holding, suspicion, emotion, and memories, might not be strong enough to beat the royal flush of documentation held by the defense. As the doors of the High Tribunal closed, the image of Prince Harry that emerged was not one of a conquering hero, but of a man lost in a maze of his own making. He went to London seeking justice, but he found himself trapped in a web of contradictions. He demanded privacy while selling his secrets. He demanded accountability while refusing to answer the magistrate's questions. He wept for his wife's misery while she lived her best existence across the ocean. This proceedings has exposed the fragile foundation of the Sussex brand. It has shown that you cannot rewrite history just because you have a platform. In the brutal fact-based arena of a tribunal, narratives don't matter. Proof does. And as Harry argues with magistrates and fights with barristers, the world is watching a prince who seems to be fighting a warfare that ended years ago, against enemies that might not even exist in the way he thinks they do. The question now isn't just whether he will triumph or be defeated in this matter. The question is what will be left of his reputation when the dust settles. If the tribunal rules against him, if the magistrate decides that his claims are baseless and his testimony was unreliable, it will be the final nail in the coffin of his credibility. He will be seen not as a victim of the press, but as a man who tried to censor the truth and failed. And that is a verdict that no amount of Netflix documentaries can overturn. What do you think? Is Harry courageous for standing up to the system? Or has he completely lost touch with reality? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.